Welcome on in. This is Three Bold Takes. Freddie, Chase, and Quinn on your screens. Guys, thank you so much for joining. We are still doing our new head coaches' expectations for the upcoming season, and we're heading over to the University of Washington, where Kalen DeBoer left for the University of Alabama, and Jedd Fisch from Arizona will step in to take control of the national championship runner-up team. Quinn, some expectations for Fisch in his first season.
Well, all right, let's start with this. What he did in Arizona impressed me a lot. Arizona was kind of in the dumps, and he drugged them back to being competitive. And Arizona's not historically a program who is that good at football. Let's be real. But now Washington, polar opposite story. The last two coaches they've had have found success at Washington. My concern is you're no longer playing in the Pac-12. So we've seen the success for Kalen DeBoer. We've seen the success for Patterson before him. And I think that success can be replicated in Washington, but what's it going to look like now? Because now for every college football program outside of the Southeast, you've been really pushing to achieve a 10-win season's a great season, where there's people in the Southeast that feel like there's 8-win teams that are super talented and they just drop the ball a handful of times during the season. That's going to start happening in Big Ten play. That's the reality. And now if we want to specifically talk 2024, my expectations is try to get 6-6 and get you to a bowl game. Like, if we're being completely honest, your roster's ripped apart, your new coaching staff, basically a brand new football team entirely, and you're going to a much more competitive conference. There's going to be losses that they have, not because they're terrible, but because they're young and rebuilding and building an identity from the ground up in a conference where you got a lot of teams. Penn State, even though Harbaugh's gone, Michigan's identity will more than likely not change, or at least not change drastically. So you got Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, whether what you want to think of Lincoln Riley or not, all of those, just off the top of my head, that's 5 programs that are firmly seated in their identity. And then you've also got other potential big hitters like Wisconsin and Nebraska, who have really talented coaching staffs who are already a step ahead of you in terms of trying to build an identity for their program in the Big Ten. So it's going to be an uphill battle that I think is achievable, but not in 2024. We're talking my prediction is a 7-6 season, winning a small bowl game over a team like Western Michigan.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the similar train as well, right? Like, after everything's been gutted, after the dust has settled from the implosion of the building, what's left is not going to win you 10 games, 11 games. Now, I want to bring this up as well. Of all of the teams that are going to a new conference, I think there is 2 teams that should have expectations to compete for a conference championship. Out of all the realignment we've had, the entire Pac-12 gone, there are 2 teams, and obviously Texas and Oklahoma. Those 2 teams are Oregon and Texas. I think those are the only 2 teams that should have anything in their mind about a conference championship, whether that's winning it, playing in it, or heck, even being close to making a conference title. And Washington's just not on that list. Now, what he did at Arizona was unprecedented. I loved every minute of it. I loved the bowl game so much because even though Arizona was ranked, I think 14th at the time that they played in the bowl game, there still was a lot of doubt in Arizona in that bowl game. And they came up and they shut the haters up. And I just hate that now they're probably going to be going in the dumps again. Unfortunately, now we'll see about that. It's another video topic. But I like your analysis there, Quinn, on about 7-6. That sounds right. You're not beating the Penn States. You're not beating the Wisconsins probably. Nebraska's kind of up there. Maybe. Quinn, I know you're a little high on Nebraska compared to a lot of other people, but we will see what ends up happening, but I don't know. I don't know. Chase?
Yeah, I think Jedd Fisch is a wonderful hire for where they were at. You got to remember, DeBoer leaves after the national championship game. A lot of the coaching vacancies are already secured. A lot of the big name head coaches are already kind of gone at this point. So Fisch is arguably one of the most notable ones to come off. Huge array of NFL teams that he worked for, a couple college teams. So it's kind of crazy. He's an older coach. And correct me if I'm wrong, Quinn, but he's only been a head coach for a few years at the college level.
I believe so.
Yeah, he's in his 50s, so he's an older head coach, and he's still relatively young in his college coaching career. But it's just an absolutely brutal thing to bring. Because if this is Kalen DeBoer, I think we're talking about, hey, these guys could win the Big Ten championship in his first season. You got Jedd Fisch coming into, like Quinn mentioned, a gutted roster, and then it's changing over to the Big Ten, a really tough conference in itself. It's going to be really hard for Jedd Fisch to get this off the ground. Because also you got to look at Washington and Arizona. Arizona is going to have a lot of players that compete well for Arizona. They're going to be a good team, but bringing those guys with you to Washington isn't necessarily going to move the needle. And I think he brought about 7 or 8 guys with him from Arizona to play, and they're not going to necessarily move the needle. Definitely playing in the Big Ten, I would think. Maybe that's a little mistaken in my part, but you have the 29th overall recruiting class. I think that's another thing that it's just hurting them because they don't have enough recruits. They lost a couple of those guys that ended up going to Alabama following DeBoer, a couple guys that transferred out following DeBoer. And then as well, you guys mentioned schedule stuff. You got Michigan, Iowa, Penn State, Oregon, USC, just to name a few on this schedule. It's a tough first year for Fisch. I think it's going to be around that 6-6 area as well. I could see them having a little bit of an 8-4 run, maybe if Iowa has kind of a down year, if they can get up on USC and UCLA from the Pac-12 as well. But it's going to be a very, very tough year in which I thought Washington and Oregon were going to be almost stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to play in the Big Ten championship and really compete for it. And now Washington is kind of going to fall by the wayside, I think. You're going to have to give Fisch a couple years, I believe, to fully get his go out at building his program. Because it took him a couple years at Arizona, but like we saw, he made Arizona a football team this past year and made them look amazing. So I have no doubt that he's going to be able to do that at Washington. Just won't be right away.
Let me ask you this. I know 2024, we're saying 6-6. I personally will give them a floor as low as 5-7, if I'm being honest. Like if they can pull 5 wins and miss a bowl game, I'll be understanding. But long term, what do you consider a successful coaching job for Fisch? Because for me, if you can obtain what 2010 to 2017 Auburn was in the SEC, where you're consistently competitive and occasionally you strike above your weight class and go all the way. If you can achieve that as Washington, for me, that's an elite coaching job in the Big Ten.
Especially
because I don't think Washington will ever be a Michigan, an Ohio State, an Oklahoma, a Texas, an Alabama where you can dominate the sport. But to be consistently 8, 9, 10, 11 wins every single year, to me, that's an elite coaching job at Washington in the new conference.
Yeah, I gotta agree there because you look at a lot of these coaches. You've had some successful coaches come through there. They've kind of used Washington as a stepping stone, so they don't stick around for a very long time. So that's what you're going to get with Fisch. If he's very successful, he won't be there very long. But if he's mediocre and striking above the weight class, like you say, then he'll probably be there for a good amount of time. But yeah, I think that's a good analogy there to into the Auburn 2010s team, because just staying above that 7-5, 8-4 range, and then okay, we just beat Alabama this year, or we just got Georgia this year, and hey, we might make the SEC championship. That's a very good point. Definitely with playing with Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, and then who else that they might add in the coming years in the Big Ten. All right, guys. Well, I think that's all we have for our new head coach expectations. This time, Washington and Jedd Fisch. Guys, for Freddie, Chase, and Quinn, we thank you so much for listening, for hearing us out, and let us know what you think about Fisch and the hiring at Washington and what you think he might do this year. For the 3 Bold Takes team, we're out.